We installed solar panels on our home 2 years ago, but now we're in the process of converting it into a rental property. So the big question is, was it worth it now that this will no longer be our primary residence?
Turned out to be a complete waste of time and money.
This video isn't going to go into how solar panels or solar systems work. There's plenty of other videos for that, but it is for property owners and investors looking to make smart investments in their properties.
This video is also not sponsored. We'll be sharing our honest opinions, exactly what we paid, and how long it will take for us to break even.
We'll also show you our before and after electric bills because the difference is pretty wild.
So if you're on the fence about solar, this data might help you decide if it's worth it or a waste for your rental property.
We purchased this property in June of 2021 as our primary residence. We love this house and we put a lot of work into it over the last few years.
But we're also in a city with historically high electricity rates, and as those rates continue to rise, our bills were starting to sting.
We're in a time of use billing area, so when power is used at peak hours, those bills really start to add up fast.
We did what we could to keep some of the big usage jobs like laundry kept to off-peak hours. But some things, like having the AC running when it's 120 degrees outside, were unavoidable.
We also own 2 electric vehicles and charge those primarily at home. Those have added a bit to our bill, but maybe not as much as you would expect, since on a time of use plan, we can choose to charge them at a time when power is very cheap in the overnight hours.
We were planning to stay in this house long term, so we saw solar as a way to control our monthly expenses and make a good investment into the house.
Now, fast forward to today, and we're just a few weeks away from turning this house into a seasonal midterm rental.
We expect usage to remain approximately the same, but since we'll no longer be charging 2 electric vehicles here every day, we do expect the overall usage to go down a bit when we convert it to a midterm rental. That being said, we do plan to advertise EV charging as an amenity because we have seen that make a difference at other properties we have here.
Once we decided to move forward with solar, we started investigating different companies and getting quotes, and the range of different prices we saw was really pretty surprising.
We got a quote from a highly rated local company for $61,170. Then we had a door-to-door salesman from a national company give us a second quote for $56,000.
Tesla came in at around $45,000, and then the final quote that we received in the company that we went with was $36,700. And this is from a company called Project Solar.
That was a big swing between the highest quote and the lowest quote, and the reason Project Solar is able to keep their pricing lower is because they don't use salespeople.
Most solar companies build in around a 20%, sometimes higher commission structure for their salespeople, and Project Solar doesn't do this. They have a low overhead model and they pass those savings on to the consumer.
So if you are thinking about solar, then you'll want to stick around to the end of this video because we have a special offer for you from Project Solar.
So exciting!
So Project Solar's role was to handle all the drawings and permitting with the city and the utility, and then they contracted the installation to a local company who did a nice job with the install.
When it comes to equipment, solar panels are kind of a commodity now. Most of the big solar companies are buying materials from the same few manufacturing companies.
We made sure that what Project Solar was recommending was good quality stuff, and they got panels from a company called Canadian Solar, and the electronics, inverters, and other hardware from Enphase, which is one of the biggest names in the hardware part of the industry.
All of the quotes that we received came with similar warranties, and Project Solar included a 10-year workmanship warranty, a 25-year hardware warranty, and a 25-year production guarantee.
The local company did have a 25-year warranty across the board, including the workmanship, and they had great reviews online, so I have no doubts they would have done an awesome job. If you're someone who's totally focused on customer service and local support, then going with a trusted local company may be worth the extra money.
We honestly assumed that by going with Project Solar, we would be sacrificing good customer service for that lower price point. It didn't scare us as much because Steven does know a lot about the equipment and he felt confident that he could probably handle it himself if needed, but we've actually been pleasantly surprised. We're 3 years into the start of the whole process and we've only had to contact customer service once, but when we did, the Enphase warranty support was great. They had a new part that we needed shipped out to us within 3 days.
One thing to note here is that when we added the solar panels, we had to upgrade our main electrical service panel to 200 amps, and that came at a cost of $3,100, but that is included in our $36,700 total price for the whole system. It did include a main panel upgrade.
And with the federal solar tax credit of 30%, we received $11,027 as a tax credit, bringing the real cost of the system down to $25,730.
Great deal.
The only downside, looking back, that we can say is the whole process did take a while. From when we first started the process with Project Solar to when we had permission to operate the system from our utility, it was about 10 months.
Once we decided to use Project Solar, the design and permitting process took about 3 months, and then the panels weren't installed for another 3 months after that. And then utility took about 4 months to approve the installation.
This may not be unique to Project Solar, maybe just the way it goes, but it's something to consider and check if you are on a tight timeline.
Now let's get into the numbers, because this is where it really starts to get interesting.
Before we had solar, the total cost we paid the utility for electricity in the year 2022 was $6,723.
Panels were installed midway through 2023, so we didn't have a full year of data to reference until 2024. With the panels up and running for that entire year, our electricity bill came to just $486.
The utility does charge you a minimum connection charge and some regulatory fees, and that's what's made up in that $486 bill. But what that means is that in 1 year, we saved $6,307, which was awesome.
And that puts our expected payback period at just 4 years.
And that's assuming that electricity rates stay flat, which they never do. Historically, they've always increased a few percent per year, making our payoff period even sooner.
Next, let's talk about production versus usage. Because we didn't just reduce our bills, we've actually produced more than we've consumed.
In 2024, our system produced 19.6 megawatt hours of power. We only consumed 17 megawatt hours in the house, and so that means we sent 2.6 megawatt hours back to the grid.
We're currently on net metering 2.0, which pays us around 20 cents per kilowatt hour that we are able to produce and export.
This means overall our system produces more energy than we use. At times, like when full sun is shining on the panels, excess energy gets sent back to the grid. Our electric meter keeps track of this, and we earn money from the utility based on how much overproduction we have. And that's when the payback math really starts to become more favorable.
Hashtag worth it.
Overall, the system is performing exactly as we expected it to, and with that 25-year warranty, we should get about 2 decades worth of profitability on electrical savings.
The only issue we've ever had was with a gateway device that connects the system to the internet for monitoring, and we quickly noticed this, called up the customer support. Enphase was great. They sent us a replacement in a couple days, and I installed it myself. They did share, though, that we would be covered by a full service warranty, and they could have sent someone to swap this out if we wanted to.
And other than that, the only thing we really have to do for maintenance is clean the panels about once per quarter.
This is just a rinse with a hose, and we brush them with a microfiber brush, and we see our production go up about 10% after the cleanings, which is nice.
When we bought this house, we never intended for it to be a rental property. But if there is anything predictable about our lives, it is that our future plans are unpredictable.
That's very true. So if you're curious about our reasons for turning this house into a midterm rental, where we're going to be living next, and what's going on in our lives, make sure you subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming video all about that.
But now that we're converting this property into a midterm rental property, one of the questions we've been asking ourselves is, would we still have done this if we knew that we were going to be converting it to a rental property?
Like we mentioned before, our overall consumption probably will stay similar once it's a rental property, but we are on that net metering agreement where if excess power is generated, we will send it back to the grid and get credits for that.
Once this property is rental ready, we will be able to charge a solid nightly rate for it, but have lower utility costs and therefore lower operating expenses overall and higher profits.
So the answer is yes. Even as a rental property, the solar system is a solid choice. We have very high electricity rates here that are offset by the solar system. We have a plan to hold this property for a long time, and it is a nice marketable feature that we have free EV charging, which with a solar system doesn't cost us anything.
This is a win-win situation.
Let's zoom out a little bit because this all seems a little too good to be true. Solar made sense, a lot of sense for this property, and it might make sense for yours. So let's go over a few situations where it would be worth considering for your property.
If your property has high energy usage, solar is a smart way to offset your electrical consumption. Think of things like properties with heavy AC usage, pools, or just ones that are mostly occupied throughout the year.
It also makes sense if you're planning to hold the property for a long enough time that you can take advantage of the basically free utilities once the system is paid off.
You should also check with your state and utility incentives, see if you have something like a net metering program. We're lucky to get into California's net metering 2.0 program before it changed to net metering 3.0 with less favorable terms. The basic gist of what's changing with net metering agreements that we've seen is that the utilities are paying people less and less for excess generation.
Whether you're structuring your rental property as a short-term, mid-term, or long-term rental, solar can make sense for properties where you, as the host or landlord, are paying the utilities. That way you are the one benefiting from the lower bill.
But even if you had a scenario where you were long-term renting and the tenant was paying for utilities, you could explain that to them that the electrical bill is going to be heavily discounted and factor that into the rental rate that you are charging for the property.
Now, on the flip side, there may be properties where this just doesn't make sense, or the payoff is not worth the effort.
Maybe there are other factors like seasonality that is going to result in your house being vacant for a good chunk of the year. Then the payoff period is going to be a lot longer.
Another scenario would be if you're planning to sell the property in the next couple of years. Yes, solar can add resale value to a home, but that short-term payoff might not be worth it.
We also don't really see solar leases as a good option. If you aren't buying the system outright, you aren't going to get the same tax incentives and you aren't going to realize the long-term savings in the same way as if you owned it.
And location really matters here too. If the roof of your property is shaded most of the day or the solar exposure isn't great, that's going to be a deal breaker.
There's no sun.
One of the biggest considerations that it comes down to is what are you paying for electricity from your utility? Here in Palm Desert, it's a time of use plan, but on average, we are paying around 40 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas just 20 minutes away in our Basecamp 74 property, different utility company there, and we pay around 21 cents per kilowatt hour, almost half the price.
Same sun exposure, but it would be a totally different payoff timeline. So in Palm Desert, our system will pay for itself in about 4 years, but up at Basecamp 74, it would take almost twice as long.
That doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad investment. You just need to be prepared and understand what your return on your investment is before making that leap.
If you're seriously considering solar, here are a few things that we've learned along the way that might help you make a more informed decision.
Start with looking at your historical electrical usage, especially in times of heavy usage, maybe in the summer with more AC, and think about maybe if that's going to change over time for some reason.
If you just bought the property and you don't have historical bills to look through, you could try online calculators or talk to the solar company about usage estimates based on the size of the home, HVAC usage, occupancy, and things like that.
This data is going to help you decide how big of a system you need. You don't want to have to pay extra for oversizing your system if you aren't going to use all of that production. Another thing the solar companies can do is look at the potential for production given the sun exposure. They have models and maps for this of your roof.
They'll also give you an idea of how much your system will produce, and you can use that data to calculate your ROI.
One question we've heard from people is, did you get a battery? And in our case, we didn't think it made financial sense.
Since we are on net electrical metering 2.0 and we treated our solar install as an investment, the credits we get for sending energy back to the grid are reasonable, and it didn't make sense for us to invest in a battery.
Battery prices continually do go down though. So maybe if you don't have as favorable of a net metering agreement, it might make more sense than it did for us when we decided 2 years ago.
Looking back, we're so happy with our decision to install solar at this property, and we would do the same thing again if it were purely a rental property.
Given the high rates from our utility that are only going to continue to go up, we know that even with a rental property, we're going to continue to be able to produce more power than the house uses and get credits for that and keep our energy bills low.
Just make sure you're running your own numbers based on your local utility rates, your usage, and how long you plan to hold the property.
If you're still debating about whether solar makes sense for your situation and have a question, drop it in the comments box below. Maybe we can help.
If you've already gone solar, let us know what company you went with, how it's working out for you, and if you're seeing a similar payback timeline.
And if you're interested in Project Solar, the company we use, we'll put a referral link in the description box below, which waives the $100 security deposit, which is what you need to otherwise pay to start the process.
Please give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful. And for more investment property tips and tricks, check out the video here on screen.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.